That's it. Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
Yeah, I came here to do fun stuff.
That's right. That's right. Some breaking news that I don't know if you saw this on social media that I wanted to start off with before we get into some of this football. Our old buddy Eddie Smith, a Notre Dame baseball alum, just named the head coach at the University of Washington, back in his home state of Washington, after 3 years at Utah Valley. So pretty big news for Big Eddie as he lands himself a big job at the University of Washington. He's from Olympia originally. Do you remember Eddie?
I remember the name. I think I would remember.
Do you remember the Virginia hat that you had in your collection for a while?
Yeah, I do know that came from him.
That came courtesy of Eddie. He was a assistant coach under Brian O'Connor at the University of Virginia for several years. He's been at LSU. He's been at he was actually at Notre Dame for a year, Santa Clara, kind of moved around. He was a really good junior college coach before he kind of got back into the Division I ranks. So congratulations to Eddie Smith, Notre Dame baseball alum. He was a walk-on here at Notre Dame, and he has moved his way up the ranks, and he's the head coach now at UW out there in Seattle. So he'll be coaching in the Big Ten. Fill in the blank, Jesse. It's blank that Mitchell Evans didn't play the entire month of November after tearing his ACL last season, but he still led Notre Dame in both receptions and receiving yards for the season.
Yeah, it's a disappointment. And to me, it's overall shows the lack of production and maybe you could say, injuries in the wide receiver room last season. This is an offense that needs a wide receiver to have 1,000 yards and to be the leading, receptions guy. So, as some people might think it's amazing. If you want an offense that's going to be high octane, explosive, and kind of keep up and maybe, beat some of those top tier teams in the country, you need 1,000-yard receiver. You need maybe two guys pushing 1,000 yards, right? And you need wide receivers ultimately being the leader in receptions as well. And so I get it, and I think this kind of plays into some of the stuff that's maybe been going on in the chat. When there's lack of wide receiver production and you see guys not committing, what signs are there to point to that this offense is going to be in high octane offense? The timing on that was a little out of your favor, but they do kind of tie into one another.
As I was reading this question, I'm like, man, this pretty much ties into the recruiting question that we were just talking about here a second ago. And that has something to do with the coaching that these guys had before. Obviously, the up and down stay of the room. But, like you look at, he only played in 8 games and basically part of 8 games last season, whereas guys like Flores, Tyree, they played in 12 games each. Jaden Thomas played in 11 games. Greathouse, played in 12, I believe it was, as well. And to me, part of it has to do with the state of that wide receiver room, but it also had to do with sort of the leftover remnants of the Tommy Rees, Brian Kelly offense that Jared Parker was running last year. And they still were just not able to get that downfield passing game going. And that's something that we've talked about with, like some of these these up and coming quarterbacks, obviously, that Notre Dame has. That's got to be it can't just be check down Steve Angeli. It's got to be an offense that's willing to push the ball downfield and take shots downfield. And kind of tying back into some of this conversation that was going on, when you have a CJ Carr, when you have a Kenny Minchie, when you have a Deuce Knight, those kind of guys, then that affords you some leeway, I think, as well, with whoever ends up in that wide receiver room, because when you have those kind of guys, you expect those kind of quarterbacks to also make your wide receivers better as they work with them. And that's got to be a part of it, obviously, going forward. But, again, I think a lot of it still had to do with sort of the tight end heavy philosophy and approach that Notre Dame had last year offensively. And I think we all expect to see a big difference this season with Mike Elko and when you throw in a Riley Leonard and when you throw in some of those transfer portal quarterbacks like Tommy's guy, the Bo Show that he talks about, and Chris Mitchell, and all these guys. You throw those kind of guys, veteran guys, into the mix, it's going to look a lot different this year. So there's an article up, and I don't know if you've had a chance to see this yet, Jesse. Article up on Notre Dame's athletic website, UND.com. Ivan Maisel, veteran ESPN guy, wrote it about Jack Swarbrick. It takes a look back at some of Swarbrick's top accomplishments from his 16 years as athletic director at Notre Dame. So here are some of the things that Swarbrick was responsible for during his tenure. The scheduling agreement with the ACC, hiring Brian Kelly, hiring Marcus Freeman, the Campus Crossroads project, which, as Maisel points out in this article, they added 800,000 square feet of classrooms, the student activity, hospitality space, studio, TV type studios and stuff like that, all of it. And also included in that, this was kind of the interesting part that I saw in there, part of Swarbrick's plan to generate more of a home field advantage for Notre Dame that he felt like they were lacking by building, the Campus Crossroads project, basically adding a second press box. They were able to move some of the more sedate Irish fans farther away from the field and basically put them in luxury suites. So maybe you had a little bit rowdier fans out there, closer to the field. So that was one of the things. Adding the video board at the stadium, 10 national championships won by the Olympic sports, the growth of the Fighting Irish media department, FIM, which is responsible for, among other things, the social media and other content that they do. And I actually thought of a late one. Of course, the Irish Athletics Center and the new expansion of the Notre Dame football facility as well are part of that. So that's kind of a short list of some of the higher highs. What do you rank at the top of that list? How would you rank them? And you don't have to go, through your list. Give me your number one. We'll kind of talk about it a little bit. We'll kind of go through the list as you give me your rankings.
This is hard because I've thought about it all day, and they have different impacts, but I think the one I would have to go that was his biggest impact was the Campus Crossroads projects, because not only is he creating, space for the student body and for the academia side of things, but then you're also you're beautifying or enhancing your stadium. That goes well with recruits, that goes well with coaches, that goes
functional
well with alumni.
Use of the stadium. Yeah.
Right. You're not just adding to add on. And so all of those additions, making the stadium look more modern and up to date with, some of these, what I would say SEC stadiums, Big Ten stadiums that are, that you're kind of competing with. And then you throw in the combination of, the video board and creating that home field advantage that you were talking about. They added I feel like the audio and the lights are an also, added element that came, through that project as well. So I think when you combine, enhancing Notre Dame academia and, exposure, not only on the athletic side, but for alumni, fans, whoever, I think that one's got to be at the top for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I've got this lower on I've actually got it number 4 on my list, and I'll tell you what my number 1 is here in just a moment. But I mean, I think that it did have a lot of impact. And the article notes that they went 40-5 in home games over their last 7 seasons after the renovation from 2017 through 2023. Now, what the article neglects to mention is the 2016 season, which was also played after the stadium was expanded, when they went 3-4 at home, so they're actually 4 more losses, excuse me, that would be included since the renovation. But they hit the high notes, over the last 7 seasons. It's true. And of course, those losses, Ohio State, Cincinnati, Georgia, 3 college football playoff teams. But then, of course, you have 2 massive duds as well, with Stanford and Marshall being losses in Marcus Freeman's first season. But the stadium is much more of a home field advantage. I will have to say that. If Vince and I think we're talking about it last week. It's more of a home field advantage, I think, though, even specific to night games than it is the day games, because the night games have such a different environment in there, with everything they're doing with the light shows and all that stuff. And, let's be honest, people have been outside tailgating longer, doing their stuff, having more fun, little liquid encouragement before they come in the stadium. So there's definitely a much better home field advantage, especially specific to the night games. Have you been to a night game since the renovation?
Yeah, I have.
Do you remember which one?
I went to the Michigan game.
Oh, that's right. I
went to the USC game.
Because you went to both Michigan games a few years back, didn't you? That's right.
Both games under the lights.
Okay, so you've got Campus Crossroads number 1. I've got it number 4 on my list. And I agree with what Andrew is saying. Number 1 on the list to me has to be the hiring of Brian Kelly.
This is what was fighting me at number 1 and number 2. So this was number 2 for me.
Yeah, and this is at the top of my list because regardless of whatever you think of Brian Kelly now and how he left and all that other stuff, the football is the flagship of Notre Dame. Like that's it. The old cliche, it drives the bus, right? Football absolutely drives the bus at Notre Dame, and it was rudderless for a long time. The Bob Davie, Tyrone Willingham, Charlie Weiss years. Like things got a little bit better under Charlie Weiss, but then they fell off, obviously, the last, 3 years, I guess, under Charlie, So it was like one good year, one average to bad year. One good year, like Weiss put together at least 2 good years in his first 2 years. But again, we saw things fall out. The program had to be stabilized. You needed a program developer and a program builder. And that's what Jack Swarbrick got with Brian Kelly. He brought a ton of stability to the program. 2 college football playoff appearances, 1 BCS championship game appearances because of 3 undefeated regular seasons. I mean, literally, you hadn't seen anything like that since Lou Holtz, and he leaves as the program's all-time wins leader. So again, regardless of what you think about him right now, you had to have Brian Kelly to truly bring the program back to consistent national prominence, and that's what Jack Swarbrick got when he hired Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, as much as you want to argue about Brian Kelly, he went to, a national championship. He went to 2 college football playoffs. He whipped out 5 straight seasons of 10-win, football at least, right? There were a couple 11-win, 12-win teams, and really outside of his, 4-8 season, and I'll give him a mulligan on the 4-8 season. When you're a head coach at Notre Dame, and you're here for 14, 15 seasons, even Nick Saban, even, Kirby, when he started at Georgia, they all had, kind of rough season. So I'm willing to give Brian Kelly a mulligan season. So outside of his mulligan season, his worst season was 8-5. And again, he averages
outside of his mulligan season, just to clarify if anybody
outside of the mulligan season.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, he's a guy who averaged 10, 11 win seasons at Notre Dame. And to me, it was a big risk because, Notre Dame was in a desperate situation. Willingham fell through, Weiss fell through. Notre Dame, had they gone 3 consecutive coaches, mediocre to bad coaches, it would have been an even worse situation. Brian Kelly pulled them out, and it was a risk to go after a guy, only that had been to Grand Valley State, Cincinnati. It's not like he'd been, in the Power 5 yet. It's not like he had a ton of success on the national stage, right? So I feel like that was a risk in itself for Swarbrick, is going after a guy, probably a little bit under the radar. And at the time he got heat for because he wasn't able to get Urban Meyer or the bigger names that were out there.
Yep, exactly. So where'd you put Marcus Freeman? I'm curious to see where you put the hiring of Marcus Freeman. I struggled a little bit. I've got him pretty high on my list, though.
I have it at number 4.
Okay. I've got him at number 3. And, 2 years in, hasn't been to the college football playoff yet. Handful of bad losses, basically, and still sort of learning on the job. But again, I see Ted is still here in the chat, so he'll love this. The recruiting in general, and not just the recruiting, but, like you've got to remember, Marcus Freeman is doing this recruiting in the full-blown NIL era. When, what would it have looked like under Brian Kelly? It was borderline enough under Brian Kelly, and he didn't have to deal with NIL and pay for play and all these different things when he was here. So when I look at where recruiting is going, and especially when you look at the quarterback recruiting, which is the big whiff ultimately of Brian Kelly's tenure at Notre Dame, is doing better, getting championship caliber quarterbacks. Maybe it's still early, but I've got Freeman number 3 on my list because of just there's a different energy around the program, and it starts with the job that they're doing recruiting these guys.
Yeah, I would. It's 4 for me, and I have the national championships at number 3. And the reason I have Freeman at 4 is, if you ask me this question in 10 years, it obviously could be subject to change. But right now, Marcus Freeman really hasn't pushed the needle beyond what Brian Kelly did after he left Notre Dame in terms of, wins and losses, big bowl wins, playoff appearances, that sort of stuff. I think the recruiting is better. I think the culture is better. I think the program is better. I think that the coaching staff is better, except that stuff. But in terms of actual wins and losses results, it's, pretty similar again to what Brian Kelly did. And so until Marcus Freeman goes over that edge, I'm not willing to move him up this list, quite yet. And
well, again, see, and like Andrew's asking why he's high, because I said that, maybe this could be a little bit too high. It's because he hasn't proven anything on the field of relevance yet. He's had a couple of nice seasons, but he was also handed, the keys to a really nice car when he took over the program. The program that Marcus Freeman took over is better than any of the previous coaches at Notre Dame since Jerry Faust took over. Like Lou Holtz didn't take over a program that was in good shape when he took over from Jerry Faust. Bob Davie, the program was trending down when he took over from Lou Holtz. Ty Willingham, they fired Bob Davie. Willingham took over a program, that again was up and down. You'd have a good year, you'd go to a Fiesta Bowl, and then the next year, you're in the toilet bowl. And then Charlie Weiss took over a program that wasn't in good shape from Ty Willingham, and BK obviously took over a program that was in at least a little bit better shape than those previous coaches, probably, but still not great. But Marcus Freeman he got to take over a program that was in better shape. The biggest thing that was on him was continuing to revamp the recruiting efforts, and that's what he has done so far. But like I said, if you're gonna, if you can argue that Freeman is too high just because it's still so early in his tenure after only 2 years, and again, he hasn't done anything of true relevance on the field yet. That's why this year is so big, I think. Now, you said the 10 national championships by the Olympic sports is your number 3, right? I actually put that a lot lower, and I'm going to tell you why. Because there's only one coach, and that is the second fencing coach. They've had 2 fencing coaches win national championships. The second fencing coach is the only coach on the list of those 10 national championships that Swarbrick has actually hired. So, how much credit, I realize that at the end of the day, an athletic director on his resume, it's going to say X amount of championships or no championships won in his tenure. And it's obviously better to have coaches who have won championships, but how much credit does Swarbrick get for a lacrosse coach that was hired, 5 athletic directors ago, and Muffet McGraw, who was hired by the same athletic director? How much credit does Swarbrick get for Muffet McGraw and Kevin Corrigan, winning those national championships ultimately, considering they were both head coaches at the same time as Lou Holtz back in the 80s.
Yeah, I don't know how much credit you get. You just kind of have to manage that situation and make sure that, you're providing those coaches with exactly, what they leave. You're keeping them satisfied. You're keeping them, essentially not looking elsewhere. And so managing those relationships, I feel like, is more of what Jack Swarbrick did. And, maybe even navigating the boat a little bit. Maybe, when he did come in, there were some people that were uneasy. I know like a month ago or so when my boss left, I was uneasy about, how things would transition. So
who's going to take over?
Yeah, just naturally how projects are going to, be handed off, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm sure as, head coaches and the amount that he has to deal with across all the sports at Notre Dame, it's still a challenge. Just, maintain those relationships, make sure everyone's comfortable. They have the things they need, the tools they need to recruit, on field, on court, etc. So while I discredited him a little bit for it, I still think there's still, maybe some aspects that aren't considered.
Sure. I put the scheduling agreement with the ACC. I've actually got that second on my list. Where did you put that? I'm guessing fourth or fifth, maybe someplace, or even lower.
Yeah. I kind of want to reorder mine a little bit.
I actually left out, the new football facility because it wasn't on my original list. I would probably move that up, I would probably bump the scheduling agreement down a little bit and move the football facility
like those
up.
Can be like lumped together with the campus crossroads, like all of the on-campus facilities. I think that all those can be, essentially lumped in there.
Well, like together. The new football facility expansion, though, as we see, it's long overdue, and we know that it was something that Kelly was fighting for, and he never got. And I think it is also significant that just 2 years into his tenure, Marcus Freeman gets it. Now, a large part of that goes to the fundraising that they're able. I mean, all these facilities come from fundraising. That's what it is. Specific to the scheduling agreement, like with the ACC, I know a lot of people don't like it. It still gives you 5 games a year against Power 5 opponents, and you're going to get Clemson's and Florida States, and you never know. Like Duke was a ranked team last year. NC State, Louisville. It gives you a solid foundation to help your schedule because you're playing what's now Power 4 opponents. And even bigger picture than that, the Olympic sports, the 3 things that Notre Dame has to have: a path to the playoff, a TV contract of its own, and a place for the Olympic sports. In the ACC, this agreement gives Notre Dame's Olympic sports a home base. And, even though maybe you don't think about it when you're watching a basketball game or a baseball game or a softball game or whatever, that's that agreement, Notre Dame being in the ACC in those other sports, helps Notre Dame's football program stay independent as well.
Yeah, I think if I had to reshuffle my list, I like the facilities, Crossroads at 1, hiring of Brian Kelly at 2, ACC agreement at 3, hiring of Marcus Freeman at 4, national championships 5, and then the media department at the very end. Media department, it's nice, but everyone's doing it. If you're not doing it, you're falling behind.
Right. No, that's exactly it. If you weren't doing it, then what are you even doing in 2024? But at the same time, like those things are very important, just to the image that you're presenting. Like when you think about all these, things that happen on signing day, for example, and some of the stuff that we get, after a football game and all these different things. You're absolutely right. You basically have to do it or you're behind everybody else. But at the same time, they did do it and they've continued to expand it. So it at least needs to be on there, but you're right. It's down at the bottom. What about the video board? I think that's on there as well. Like, do you think, do you remember when it was a controversial conversation? Are you too young to even sort of remember that there was any controversy around it?
No, I remember the video board. And again, for this one, I just threw it into the rest of all the other like on-campus football related
kind of lumped it in with
facilities.
facilities and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's personally, I like it. You know, I like the fact that you can see if it's something that you know, the guys running the video board think is going to benefit Notre Dame, they show that play over and over again. And there used to be, you know, like there's still long TV timeouts and all that kind of stuff. And you would basically just sit there in the stadium and, you know, maybe watch the fencing team get recognized for their latest national championship, or, you know, just hear whatever announcements they're making over the PA during those breaks. But it was, you lost a lot of sort of crowd energy during those breaks that I think having the video board helps. And, you know, again, like when you think about the atmosphere in the stadium, they've built that thing up by having a press box on each side and that video board that helps kind of keep some of that crowd sound inside the stadium, especially during the rowdier times, you know, kind of getting back to that, you know, better environment at Notre Dame Stadium and that kind of thing that it's helped create. Did we miss anything? Did I hit everything on the list? Did we rank them all?
I think so.
All right. So that was interesting. You know, they've had that article up there for a week or so, and kind of reading through that, like I said, they mentioned a lot of the different accomplishments, and I just I thought it would be kind of worth going through here. And so some good stuff there. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, you can see it at UND.com.
So I think the overall question has to be, you know, just thumbs up, thumbs down. Where are you on Jack Swarbrick? Did he do enough or did he not do enough?
Oh, I absolutely think he did enough. Look, I think that he's in the kind of position that you're never going to please everybody, kind of just like a coach, but especially in the athletic director's seat. There's always so many mouths to feed when you think about trustees and donors and, you know, just the huge alumni base around the nation. There's always going to be somebody. Not everybody is going to agree with you. But like when you sit and look at that list, I think when you start with the fact that the football program is in the place that it needed to get to me, the conversation kind of starts and ends with that. And that's why, again, you know, no matter what you think of Brian Kelly now, they had to get the football program right. And Jack Swarbrick made 2 hires of Notre Dame football coaches, Brian Kelly and Marcus Freeman, you know, early and late. Those were his 2 hires. So I think you base it just on that alone, I think it's an overwhelming success. And like when you look at what the athletic department looks like now, what the campus looks like from the football stadium to the east with all the new facilities and everything that's gone on over there, you know, again, not everyone's going to love him, but I think you have to say his tenure was an overwhelming success at Notre Dame. When you look at where Notre Dame is now in the national standing compared to when he took over 16 plus years ago now. How about you?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think that sometimes, and especially at an institution like Notre Dame where, you know, academia is, you know, considered to be in high regards and something that Jack Swarbrick took very seriously, right? And you combine that with, you know, the impact he had across the campus, really across the country too. It's hard, or it's easy to get kind of caught up in the statistical, you know, we want national championships, we want wins, you know, wins. I would just say, you know, Notre Dame wasn't a flat out embarrassment in any sports. And I think predominantly Notre Dame is considered, you know, in the upper echelon or upper tier in majority of sports. I think maybe men's basketball might be the overall biggest, you know, disappointment when in terms of
recency.
You know, recency, big time Olympic sports. It's just the fact of the matter is you're not going to win a national championship every year, and you're lucky to win a national championship every 15 years. And that was just about, you know, how long he was here. So I thought he did enough in terms of, you know, wins, losses across multiple sports. And then again, you add in the influx of academia and the look at what campus looked like when he first got here, and then now, and look at some of the bigger facilities that across the football stadium, the practice facilities, that sort of stuff. So I'm an overall thumbs up. I'm not saying I'm like all aboard, but in terms of net positive, net negative, I'm going to go net positive.
Well, like we've got some people saying that didn't win a national championship, so how can it be a success? I mean, you got to the playoff 2 times, and if Kansas State doesn't get upset in the Big 12 championship game and Notre Dame gets to play Alabama, Notre Dame's got a national championship 12 years ago, most likely. Some of it's luck of the draw. Some of it's just look at how the programs who have won all the championships, look at how they're recruiting. That's the next step for Notre Dame. And that's why Brian Kelly was necessary to get to that step to stabilize the program. Excuse me. And that's why Marcus Freeman was necessary to take recruiting to the next level, because that's the next step to be able to truly compete for and win a national championship. Brian Kelly had given up on that at Notre Dame. That's why he's at LSU. Anthony says his biggest and only real thumbs down for Swarbrick is replacing the grass field with turf. And I thought about putting this on the list of whether or not it was, an accomplishment, exactly how it would be considered. I do wonder, do they stick with turf long-term? I would think they will, because, it's funny because most of the NFL is trying to get back to grass, where colleges, you see more colleges, especially up here in this northern part of the country, going to turf, because this is, what DCAF 18 is saying. The grass was garbage. Having been on that field in November, at when we get to go down on the field at the end of games, the grass was just in horrible shape, and it's just so hard to maintain, especially in this part of the country where obviously you can get snow and you're going to get freezing temperatures and everything else. And I realize not everyone's going to like turf, but I don't mind it. I think it provides a lot more consistency for your playing surface.
Yeah, I agree. Well, nice grass, immaculate grass is better. There's nothing worse than crappy, no good grass.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that you are going to get good, consistent grass in November is literally probably, hiring, what's his name, George Toma, the guy who's, been the guy in charge of the field at every Super Bowl ever. Bring him in and literally lay down new grass before, the week before every home game. I don't think that you could keep the same sod on the field by the time November rolls around. I think that you would have to be replacing sod all the time, and that becomes pretty cost inefficient as well at some point. So I just don't think you could do it if if you really want a good playing surface. Okay, Jess, fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame women's basketball has sold 1,000 new season tickets for the upcoming season.
It's electrifying. I think it's electrifying for a few reasons. I think that, Notre Dame has been on the cusp the last couple seasons, and this, incoming portal class, freshman class, combined with, what's still here at Notre Dame on the roster, has a lot of people excited. And I think the second part, honestly, is the Caitlin Clark effect. I think women's basketball is up in general. And I think that fans are starting to realize that the quality of the game is, let's say equal or maybe even better in instances than the men's game. And it's probably a fraction of the cost. So if you want, a good time, that's something your whole family can go to, right? I think it's more cost effective. And now if you are in belief that, okay, the product is just as good, or I'm not missing out on anything, compared to the men's game, then why not? And so I think all of those things kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, Andrew agrees with you on the Caitlin Clark effect. And I do think that some of that has played into it. I think that there are some other factors on a more micro level specific to Notre Dame. One, the program has been really good the last couple of years? Have they? They've peaked in the Sweet 16, but I think that it's so I think that people have kind of been sitting back and waiting. Do I make that investment? Do I go in? Do I get the season tickets? And in general, the women's season tickets are much more affordable, like than the men's season tickets. And like going to the Caitlin Clark effect, yeah, that's part of it. But Notre Dame kind of has its own version, again, of like if I'm looking at the micro level, you've got a Hannah Hidalgo, who there was a case for ACC Player of the Year as a true freshman. She's one of the two best sophomores in the country. Heading into her sophomore season, she's going to be playing with Olivia Miles this year and all this other talent that's going to be there as well. So success breeds interest. I think that there is, as you said, a lot of general interest in the sport of women's basketball, and there's a lot of specific interest in this program because of the kind of players that Niele Ivey continues to bring in. Thank you, Andrew. We try to promote the women's game as much as possible here on this show. Little NFL one. You sent me this, and I thought this was interesting, and I actually watched some of this today.
Did you see my Twitter today?
I did. We'll get to that here in just a second, because I'll respond to some of your knucklehead friends as well who are jumping in on this. So quarterback Joe Burrow said on the Pardon My Take podcast that if the NFL goes to 18 games, there should be 2 bye weeks. He says one of the byes should be around week 13 for the entire NFL. So he's saying second bye week, the entire league shuts down, with the caveat that they would play the Pro Bowl games that week, similar to what the NBA does with their All-Star weekend. Like you start on Major League Baseball, you shut down, everyone shuts down for a few days. You got the home run derby one day, you've got the All-Star game the next, you've got the Futures game, I think the day before that, all that. So like the NFL, he's saying, if you add an 18th game, take a second bye week, play your Pro Bowl festivities that week. And he says the bye week would also push the Super Bowl back to President's Day weekend, which would give a lot of people Monday off because it's a federal holiday, the day after the biggest game of the year. So, Jess, you buying or selling?
This is a big buy for me, ultimately. I think it is a win, win, win. I think the players get an extra week of rest for the trade-off being one more game, but they're ultimately going to get, more money out of that. I also agree that, putting the Pro Bowl somewhere in the middle of the season would get more fan engagement because you have the hot players. It's not the end of the season. You're not just like, okay, this is the remainders, the guys who aren't going on to the Super Bowl. Yeah. I think it forces people to stay up to date and engaged in the Pro Bowl. So I think it helps with that. And then the last thing that he said was talking about, everyone complains about how the day after the Super Bowl should be a holiday. So that's also fixed. So we get a win, and a win. And so, a lot of people have said, oh, injuries. Well, for 17 games right now, they get 1 bye game. So 1 bye game per 17 games. Now you get 2 per 18. So you're getting 1 bye per 9 weeks. I think that ratio is a lot better. So I actually think that helps injuries. And if you could eliminate some of these Thursday night games because of it too, I think that's ultimately where you get a lot of player agreement.
Would be great, but they're never going to do away with the Thursday games, unfortunately. But like when I originally heard him say, like the entire league is going to be off in that second bye weekend, I'm like, I don't know about that. But then when you sit back and you look at it, it's not like the Pro Bowl stuff is going to be all that stressing. Hardly anybody watches the Pro Bowl stuff because it's at the end of the season before the Super Bowl, and there's just not that much interest. I think that maybe you could generate a bit more interest in it by putting it so like the season is still going on, and now you're just creating an extra event. It's like, oh, we've got no football this weekend, but we can actually watch this Pro Bowl stuff, and then the next week everyone's back at it. So I really like it a lot. And then pushing that, but like everyone's been, oh, we need to make the day after the Super Bowl a holiday. That's something they've been talking about for a while. Not everyone's going to get President's Day off, but at least some people, are going to get President's Day off. So I actually think it's a really great idea. I like it. Joe says it might help the college football playoff. That's where, I'd have to see, because like the NFL, just the way they did things this year, because there's like that week before basically the opening weekend of the college football playoff, there's going to be NFL games on Saturday. But turns out part of the reason they had to do that, the teams that play that Saturday, the day of the college football playoff, are also going to be the same teams that play on Christmas, which is on a Wednesday this year. So I guess that's why they did it. But I like this Joe Burrow idea. He's thinking.
Well, a lot of knuckleheads were arguing with me because they thought that this takes away money from the players. Essentially, you have a set salary of, let's say 40 million, and instead of the denominator being 17, it's 18. So technically you're playing an extra game for essentially the same amount of money, but that's not true. When they expanded the season to 17 games, every
salaries
player
went up. Yeah.
Right. Every player that was still under contract got 1/17 of their contract for the extra game.
Right.
So someone making 40 million made an extra 2.2 million in that extra game. So it's not I think the players would take a trade-off of another paycheck and more rest throughout the season if it meant playing one more game. So I don't know.
I think so too. Yeah, and the knuckleheads in your Twitter timeline were trying to say, "Oh, you get paid. This is salary, not hourly. They're not going to get paid anymore." When you add extra games to a professional schedule, that's part of the deal. There's going to be more money to go around. That's why the NFL is even considering adding another game. Right.
TV money. That is all shared revenue amongst the players. The owners just don't gatekeep that money. So you get a higher percentage.
The owners obviously get a bigger percentage, but the players are still going to get something out of that. They will get more money by playing an extra game, or the NFL Players Association would never agree to it. They're not going to agree to add another game and put their bodies at risk if they're not going to get any more money for it. Pittsburgh Pirates rookie pitcher Paul Skenes has been named to the All-Star team with 10 starts to his credit. There's talk about whether or not Skenes should be the starter for the National League. Do you buy it or sell it?
Are you really asking me this question right now?
I
sell him making the All-Star team in general. I don't even think he should be on the All-Star team, let alone the starter for the National League. The guy had to pitch in half the games as everyone else. Why should he be rewarded? He's got 10 starts.
Because it's an exhibition game and he's one of the best young players in the game.
I don't care. The Pirates should have brought him up at the beginning of the season then. If he was so good and he can do this, whenever they brought him up, what were you so afraid of? He obviously was fine. Let him do it.
How about relievers? How many relievers have pitched in that?
Yeah, but they made the roster as a reliever, not a starter. The rules are different.
The guy has 78 strikeouts in 59 plus innings. I mean, come on.
That's great, but a lot of guys and
there's a 2-something ERA
in baseball and football. The more tape that gets out on you, the more. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen. I'll eat my pants if Skenes has an ERA below 3 after 20 games. I will eat my pants.
Well, you're going to be eating your pants. You better bring some peanut butter
because you're going to be. Size is
you better
doubling.
Bring some peanut butter. You better bring some jelly because you're going to be eating pants at the end of the season. Though,
there is, when you add a 10 more game sample size, there is a chance that he is going to regress. And so I think it's a lot harder for guys to do it in 20 games and have an ERA compared to a guy who has 10 games worth of ERA. So again, he's a borderline guy for me. If they wanted him in the All-Star game, he should have been called up earlier in the season. That's just my hot take. There's some jealousy in there. There's some biasy in there. And there's an understanding of Skenes is going to be in the Central for probably 15 years.
But you're going to you're going to be going to the pants party with Brick Tamblyn here pretty soon. Because I think that he's going to do all of the above. And I absolutely think just start him for an inning. Let him start out there. Why not? It's an exhibition game. People want to see him. He's one of the best young players in the game. I know that you got a problem that he's even in this game with after making just 10 starts, but he's deserving, man. He's that good. He's that good.
He's not the only one on that roster that doesn't deserve it, but I digress.
Yes. How about the New York Yankees? They've lost 16 of their last 22 overall and 6 of their last 7 heading into tonight. Do you buy or sell manager Aaron Boone as the fall guy?
I'm going to say sell. I think the Yankees naturally go through these cycles where they get off to a hot start, everything's clicking, and they plateau a little bit. And I think they kind of have to find a way to get to the through the regular season. It always feels like the Yankees sprint, and the season is more of a marathon pace. And it's like a typical race. You start out hot, and then you get into your pace middle of the season, and then you want to finish hot. Again, I don't think the Yankees know how to transition, starting off hot and then getting to where, the form they need towards the end of the season. I think this falls more so on someone like Aaron Judge, because he's been, he still has incredible numbers, don't get me wrong. But as of recently, when the team has been sliding, Aaron Judge has also been sliding. I think you throw in, some disappointments from Volpe, Trent Grisham. It's just, I think some of these pieces that they had are regressing towards the mean, since the beginning of their season a little bit. I don't think that's someone like Boone's fault. I think you mix in Garrett Cole's injuries. There's just things here and there. I don't buy this as just strictly Boone's fault.
The Yankees are very like most, if not all, Major League Baseball teams today, very analytically driven. The majority of the decisions are coming from the front office, not from Aaron Boone. He is just the conduit in the dugout, who's turning in a lineup card and making pitching changes. And even that, those kind of things are analytically driven. Now, you can look at I've heard some people say, well, they're very lackadaisical. There's no sense of purpose. They dog it out there on the field, all those kind of things. I mean, you rattled through some of the names. Basically, their entire lineup is 2 guys, Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. And who put the lineup on the field? It's Brian Cashman. Right. And I've said before, the guy has been there since the late 1990s at this point. It's like he's got a lifetime contract as general manager. I think that's the plug that has to be pulled, is Brian Cashman, if the Yankees are ever to make a move. I think that it starts with the front office for not giving Aaron Boone a better lineup to field. I mean, look at freaking Alex Verdugo. The guy was done 3 years ago. Yeah.
Gleyber Torres has been struggling. DJ LeMahieu, he's washed up at third base. Judge and Soto, yeah, your outfield set. Verdugo should be a lot better than what he is. I mean, they got guys like Ben Rice playing, Oswaldo Cabrera. It's just they're just not consistent where they thought that they were going to be consistent, unfortunately. And again, that's not on Boone. Boone's not making the offseason moves. He's not putting the roster together. He's making a lineup with the pieces that he's given, essentially. And I think, I'm just going to leave that segue alone. I'm not going to let that go into anything else.
I think I've got to agree with Anthony here. He says, listening to Jesse and Vince have verified my long-held opinion. Cubs fans are the most annoying in all of sports.
Skenes is not an all-star player.
I might just go buy a Skenes shirt here. Just start wearing
He's a great player and off to a great start. But I don't think it's fair.
Somebody else said it. It might have been Anthony. I think you're jealous of his mustache.
It's not even like the Pirates are a good team either. They have other good pitchers on that staff.
Brian says Verdugo's a bright spot role player. If he was just a role player, that would be one thing. But he's got to play more than just a role, right? I don't know. Okay, let's finish with this. Former Jacksonville Jaguars running back Maurice Jones-Drew was running with the Bulls on his vacation in Spain this week. Jesse, would you ever run with the Bulls?
Unless I was getting like $1 million. I think money can buy a lot of things, but I'm not just doing it for fun. I'm not just going out there and proving a point or, maybe had a couple in me and I feel like I have all this courage. I need some sort of trade-off in return. I'm not just running with the Bulls for no reason.
Yeah, the courage, like if I had liquid courage, even I don't know if I would do it in that case. I just think back, have you ever seen the movie City Slickers where Billy Crystal and his friends, like they start off with they're running with the Bulls over there and Billy Crystal gets gorged, in the buttocks by a bull and then he's got to fly home, with a hole in his derriere. And after getting there's just no way. There is no way. Even in my prime, when I could actually move a little bit, would I even think about doing something like this? Why would you put yourself in that kind of harm's way? I don't get it. There's just no way. Not at all. Full props to Maurice Jones-Drew because, obviously he's got some true athleticism, and maybe he's still got some moves out there. He lived to tell the tale, so props to him, but there's no way I would ever even think about doing something like this. A million different ways I would spend my money than getting chased by a bull in Spain.
If you told me you'd pay off my student debt and pay for my wedding, I'd be in that ring right now. No questions asked. No questions asked.
All right. I think that answers the question right there. And that's not a small chunk of change that we're talking about.
No, it's not.
Nope. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate you being here. We started with some recruiting and covered a lot of other stuff in the meantime. A lot of good stuff as always. Hit that like button before you head out. And otherwise, we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.